Retro Hangover is supported via Patreon by listeners like you. We would especially like to thank patrons Lyle McCarnes, Ashton Ruby, Randall Quiggle, Tony G, Katie Quigg, Paul Ramallo, Raging Demon, JC, Megan Caruso, Masked Llama, Andrew Liguori, Retro Overdrive, Ozzy Garcia, Keith Gasper, and Diskai Mera. Your continued engagement and generous donations are deeply appreciated.
Open your ears and crack some beers. You are listening to episode 112 of Retro Hangover.
Hello, retro and classic gamers. Welcome to the podcast where we beautifully beatify Beelzebub biting beaten beetle bugs. This is episode 112 of Retro Hangover. I am your co-host, Chris Copleen, with special guest, Try from My Life in Gaming. And, as always, your host, Shane. Dick Volkswagen!
You know, I didn't even think about this, but Volkswagen, that is a fantastic pun. I have to give you full credit on that one. Also, fun fact, in German, that would mean the people's dragon. So there you go.
There it is. A giant people's dick dragon.
I mean, after all, you know, Gorp is for the people, is it not?
He was created by the people, so he is for the people.
It's true.
Anyway, welcome to our wonderful show where we are going to be talking about, as you already saw, probably when you click the title, Beetle Adventure Racing, which is a patron poll winner.
That's right.
So thanks to Randall for this suggestion, which all our patrons voted on. And you can also vote on recommendations from our beautiful patrons at patreon.com. Look up Retro Hangover. And you too can vote on a patron poll, which is once a quarter. So thank you, Randall, for the suggestion. We are going to talk about this game. But first and foremost, welcome to the show, Try. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for having me. When you sent me a list of potential upcoming topics that I could possibly join in on, I was surprised to see Beetle Adventure Racing there. I was like, who would vote for this but me?
Well, you know, in the pantheon of patron selected topics, I have to say that, you know, without spoiling the ending here or anything, this is like on the end of the spectrum that's like tolerable, you know, and any of the patrons that are listening right now, you know what you did and you know what they've picked before. And like, so this was a little bit of a breath of fresh air. Not going to lie.
Yeah. I mean, the game definitely has I mean, it's one of those like not really obscure N64 games, but like, you know, it's one of the mid-range like third-party games that people do talk about. When I say mid-range, I don't mean like in terms of quality. I just mean in terms of like, you know, some people have heard of it, some people haven't. You know, it's
notoriety.
Notoriety. There you go.
Yeah.
Words.
Yeah, it's no Superman 64. That's for sure.
No.
Yes.
I will say this. I think this is the third patron game that started with a B. The letter B is dominating our patron charts. You have Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Bubsy 3D, and now Beetle Adventure Racing.
Which I still maintain Buffy for the Game Boy Color, surprisingly not a bad game.
Until the last level.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's true.
Then it becomes terrible. But as we are wont to do, before we get into the topic du jour, we'd like to talk about the games that we have been playing. So as we have our illustrious guest Try here, take it away, Try. What have you been playing lately?
Oh, well, I recently finished up Horizon Not Forbidden West Zero Dawn because when the new game was coming out, you know, I've had Zero Dawn on my backlog for years and years and years. I think I was listening to a Digital Foundry video and they were saying like, oh, like there's some new footage that just came out for Forbidden West. You know, this was before it released. They're like, oh, it's kind of spoilery. And I'm like, you know, I better like actually play through this game before I accidentally get spoiled with all the hype coming out around the new one. So I did that. I really enjoyed it. Since then, I've started up Persona 5 Strikers.
Oh,
which is, the Muso Warriors style game for Persona 5, which I'm only about like 3 or so hours into it, but I'm going to be interested to see how it pans out because I've been under the impression that it's pretty well received, especially by like the Persona fan base. Like it's very much kind of considered like almost kind of a sequel, like a kind of a good one. In terms of story and stuff, especially compared to like the fighting spinoff and the dancing spinoffs, like it seems like it's setting up to be a decent sequel. But like as a Muso game, like I'm kind of itching to get into a little bit more action, and it's been a little slower to get into that. So I'm not too sure how the Muso element's gonna pan out. And it's for more of a retro side. Yesterday I was playing Turrican 2 on the from the Turrican Flashback collection. So that's actually an emulation of the Amiga version. And I beat Turrican 1 a few weeks ago. And I feel like Turrican 2 is off to a rougher start for me. So yeah, juggling a few things.
Now, Persona 5 Strikers. My son is a big Persona 5 fan. I love the first one as well. But I've heard Strikers, that's more of a sequel to the vanilla Persona 5 as opposed to Persona 5 Royal, correct?
Right. That's why I've actually not played Royal myself. I played the first version, like, pretty soon after it came out. And I want to play Royal, but yeah, there's like a new character that they added in Royal. And she's not in Strikers from what I heard. Cause I was asking people like, do I need to play Royal before I play Strikers? And they said, no, it's a sequel to the vanilla version.
Mm-hmm. It definitely doesn't look like your orthodox Muso either. So I kind of pick up what you're putting down.
Yeah, it's weird because like I finally got into the first area where they like actually let you like switch between characters while playing. And like you're kind of getting into these like you're approaching these enemies in the field and then it unveils a whole bunch of enemies to fight. So it's almost more like, entering into battles in RPG rather than one giant field where there's just always monsters or enemies out in the field. And there's sort of like a overarching strategy to the battlefield. It doesn't seem to be quite like that so far. So I'm a little unsure how the gameplay aspect is going to shape up, but it's definitely good. Hanging out with those characters again and being in that world and with that music again. So we'll see how it turns out.
Nice. So Shane, how about you? What have you been playing? And by the way, I got to recommend Turrican to you just to get your opinion since you're a huge Contra fan. And that's essentially European Contra. So I'm glad Tribe brought that up.
I did not think I was going to like it as much as I did the first one. I was very afraid of like how, there's European games of that era love to put just like millions of like item bubbles for you to collect and like lots of secrets to discover and stuff. And I thought it was going to be very too nonlinear. And it is to a point, but it's still very firmly level based. So yeah, as a huge Contra fan who was also kind of unsure about Turrican, I would say I recommend it. I mean, it's a very different kind of game in the end, but I do recommend it. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. As far as what I have been playing, I actually have quite a bit. I've been bouncing around between a couple of things, actually. So I don't think I mentioned it because I think it was in between episodes, but I did finish Resident Evil 5.
Ooh.
I think that clocked in at about, 12 to 14 hours, give or take, for the main campaign. I have thoughts about that we'll probably end up putting down in a rapid fire review. I imagine at some point we will probably end up talking about that game in a mainline episode. But, I figure we probably should get to RE 2 through 4 first, possibly some of the other spinoffs also. But,
yeah,
all told, not a bad experience. Some completely infuriating sections, but other than that, not too bad. Better than I thought. Let's say that. Better than I thought going into it.
I'm a big defender of 5, but
we'll see. There you go. Yeah. And truth be told, I think it actually would have been a lot more enjoyable if I had actually been playing co-op with someone, since that's, literally what it was built for.
Yes, very true.
Yeah, so outside of that, though, so I actually tracked down a copy of Crimson Land. It's available on Steam, and this sounds relevant only to people who have been listening to me ramble about this for the past couple of weeks when I was talking about Vampire Survivors. And I ended up picking it up because fortuitously it went on sale shortly after I found it on Steam. If you're not familiar with it, it was a top-down like twin stick shooter from like 2003. And it was something that I played a lot of back at that time. Also happened to be when I was getting towards the end of my high school career. And so I may possibly have spent several computer science class periods clandestinely playing Crimson Land on the school PCs. Sorry, Mr. Hughes, if you didn't catch me doing that.
You're not sorry.
Cat's out of the bag now, but that game's still a lot of fun. They actually did an HD sort of remaster of it. So it looks pretty good. It plays really well. It's basically exactly how I remember it with a bunch of extra goodies. So good time. If you like twin stick shooters like that, highly recommend you go and check it out. But the giant Dark Souls flavored elephant in the room, of course, is Elden Ring. I have been playing that basically constantly since it came out, and it is fantastic. It is the best Soulsborne game. I don't care what Twitter is saying. It is brilliant, and I love it, and I am thoroughly enjoying it.
It's not too difficult, is it?
Actually, no.
Supposed to say yes.
No, listen, man, I calls them like I sees them. Okay. And the thing is like, that's what a lot of people, you know, the get gooders out there are complaining about, is that it's too easy for like a Souls game. And honestly, I think it strikes like just the right balance, especially given that it's transitioned into this open world where Soulsborne games have never really gone before. I think that tweaking of that balance, I think, really serves it very well for the style of game that it's going for. Not to say that it's not challenging, because I died to Godric like 8 times last night and got that good old Dark Souls rage back. So, but all in all, I've been very much enjoying my time with it.
I haven't picked it up yet, but I'm definitely liking what I'm hearing. You know, kind of the idea of, it sounds like you can kind of go kind of wherever you want. Like there's this boss you encounter really early on who you're probably not ready to actually handle. So the actual design of the game seems to kind of encourage you to be like, well, I guess I'm just going to go somewhere else. And then you'll just kind of organically discover these other areas and other challenges. And then when you come back, you know, you'll be ready, hopefully, from what I've heard anyhow.
Yeah. And that's kind of the beauty of it. The one thing that I will say, there are times where I miss the much more focused and purposeful level design from like DS1. But then again, I don't think you can really top that. But yeah, I think the open world nature of it sort of necessitates a break from that. But to your point, when you go and just sort of go off and start exploring and you start finding these like little side caves or like ruins or something, which suddenly turn into their own little miniature dungeon. Yeah. That's, it's so good. So good.
That's exactly what I've heard. And like, so I assume in those areas, they have that very deliberate, like enemy placement and stuff like that.
Yes,
absolutely. That's what I love about the series. I mean, that's what makes it feel like, you know, an old like Castlevania game or something like that, you know, where it's like, it's all about like, we have intentionally put this enemy here because, you know, it's going to come at you this way and you're going to come at this way. And very, very NES like sort of level design in that sense.
Yeah, for sure. And that's I think where that design sensibility still factors into this game quite a bit. You've got that sort of open worldy, like, oh, look, there's guys roaming around in this field. Isn't that neat? But then once you get to some place like today, I was just playing through Castle Morn, which is one of the areas that you get to. And once you step inside of like the castle grounds, like it's all very purposefully put together. Like there are enemies that are placed very intentionally in certain places to just totally wreck your shit if you're not paying attention, things like that. So it's yeah, man, I am looking forward to the next several hours for sure.
Nice.
But at any rate, I suppose Chris should probably talk about what he's been playing. So Chris, what have you been up to that's definitely not Elden Ring?
So I've been playing quite a bit of games lately. I'm surprised you didn't bring up Power Stone, Shane, because like you became a quick master of cheapness with that one character. I know you brought it up in our streams.
By that you mean I found one character that I was semi-decent at and just stuck with that the entire time? Yes.
Yes, until I found the character who, when she powered up, had nipple tassels, and then it was all over.
That's true.
Yes. So Power Stone, because Shane had a bachelor party. By the time you listen to this episode, he would have already had the wedding, I believe.
Yes, yeah, I believe so.
It's actually happening this weekend that you're listening to this. If you're listening to this new, so congratulations, Shane.
Thank you.
But we had a bachelor party for him, and we started out at our local arcade. And then we went over to his friend's house, and I brought my Dreamcast and a monitor. I tried to hook it up via VGA, but we couldn't get the volume to work, which is fine. So we had to hook it up through composite and that. So whatever. We still got it going, but we were able to play some Power Stone, and we all had a good time. And Shane did good work against all of us, even though we were self-proclaimed fighting game aficionados, at least of that era. And we got our asses kicked. So good job on you, Shane.
It's that Jack Juggle, baby.
Other than that, I have played Dolphin Blue, which I decided I was going, when I came back, I wanted to test out my VGA cable, and it worked beautifully on my LCD TV, and I was able to get sound. So played some Dolphin Blue, played through that. That game's hard as hell. And from what I understand, it was made by the same people who did Metal Slug, and it plays a lot like Metal Slug, and it's fantastic.
I mean, that's the main reason I want to play it. I've not played it. I assume you play with like an optical drive emulator on your Dreamcast?
Yeah, I use the mode.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So yeah, able to load it up, plays beautifully, free play. So it's all like the arcade. It's a wonderful game. Addition to that, I did finish Ys Origin with every single character. Amazing game. If you have any love for the Ys series, that is required playing. You have to play it. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I need to play that again. I've only what's her name?
So
Unica, the axe lady.
Yes, Unica.
Yeah,
yes.
I played through. It was a good while ago, but yeah, I only played through with the one character. Mm-hmm. But I'd like to play it again. I like that. I do like that sort of era of Ys.
Oh, it's so much fun. It uses the E6 engine, also the Otham Felgana engine, which I have yet to play. I'm probably going to play that as my next game coming up too.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm swapping between the E series and the other series, which is my last game I'm going to talk about here, which I just finished, the Final Fantasy III Pixel Remaster. And I had a pretty good time with it.
By 3, we're talking 3-3, not 6-3.
Yes, 3-3. The Famicom 3. I had a good time with it just because, I mean, going back to the Famicom version, which I thought was, I won't say unfairly difficult until later in the game, and just had some weird design decisions in terms of utilizing its job class, which is really half-baked when you compare it to Final Fantasy V, Final Fantasy Tactics. But of course, this was first. And you could argue who did it better between Dragon Quest III or Final Fantasy III. I think I tend to lean towards Dragon Quest III, but Final Fantasy III is far more flexible. One of the things I did like about the remaster, though, is first of all, the music is just, it's so good. It really shines through and shows what Uematsu is probably thinking about when he, was composing these tracks for the Famicom back in the late 80s. So the soundtrack's phenomenal. That and the difficulty is tweaked slightly. Having played Final Fantasy 1 and 2 Pixel Remasters, I'll say this, the Final Fantasy 3 Pixel Remasters difficulty is tweaked in such a way that it's not insultingly easy, but still makes it an easier playthrough than its Famicom counterpart by miles. So it's very accommodating, it's very accessible. And if that's one of the things you've been worried about to play a lot of these Pixel Remasters, that these games would be too hard, that's definitely not the case. Now, it might be too easy if you love the originals. I did not care for Final Fantasy 3 as much because of the really high difficulty, which is fine. If you love that, that's good. But I was finally able to beat this game as it was presented in this format, and I could say I had a good time. And I will be doing a rapid fire review in that as well, which I kind of already did, but it's going to be more long form. So there you go.
I played the DS version of that back when that came out. That's the only version of 3 that I've really played through, which I don't know how the difficulty of that compares to the original Famicom one, but I remember feeling like I was about to die almost all the time, but I rarely actually did, which is kind of like the perfect difficulty level, actually. Like you've got that tension, but then you're not like annoyed either.
No, I think you're spot on. It's been a while since I played the DS version of 3 as well. I can't remember how it compares. I just didn't really like the characters. I liked the blank slate Onion Knights. Yeah.
I kind of liked the characters that they tried to do, but then again, starting with that version, might have colored it. Remind me, the remastered, is it using Famicom style graphics, or they upgrade to like Final Fantasy Origin, like PS1 sort of style?
It's using the PS1 style.
Okay, so it's like, because they way back on the Wonder Swan, they released remastered versions of 1 and 2 that kind of look like the GBA and the PS1 versions, and there were screenshots of 1 for 3. They got canceled and never released. So it's cool that there is a version that kind of goes for that style now.
Yeah, they skipped 3 because of space limitations. So they made 1, 2, and 4 for the Wonder Swan. But that's all we got. Shane,
what?
By the way,
what do you want?
We need to talk about the game of this episode. Which is Beetle Adventure Racing. And as we kick off every single official episode, I know we've been told we waffle a bit when we do these things, but that's fine because this conversation was great. But we need to talk about this game. And before we talk about the game, we are going to get into our brief history of this game. So Shane.
Yes.
If you'd be so kind and give us a brief history of Beetle Adventure Racing.
The late 90s had to have been one of the greatest eras for racing games. Games like Cruisin' USA and Cruisin' World had become popular in what was left of arcades, alongside mainstays like Daytona USA. Many arcade-styled racers had also found a home on the Nintendo 64, which was thriving in an environment where it was pretty much that or action platformers. Whether it was the ever-popular Mario Kart, F-Zero, or Wipeout, or even the lesser-known Extreme G or Hydro Thunder, the arcade racer was still a popular genre, even if it started to wane after the release of the landmark racing sim Gran Turismo. Electronic Arts, never one to not have some product tapping into popular markets, had their own arcade-style racing series with Need for Speed that found a decent following on Sony's PlayStation. And while the series had long been multi-platform, it had yet to show up on the N64 in 1998, a platform where a release may see a bit of traction and success. So, in 1998, Electronic Arts, via EA Canada, teamed up with Paradigm Entertainment, a development studio who had previously worked on Pilot Wings 64, decided that they would create the aptly named Need for Speed 64. The game made it considerably far into development, with previews even being published in the October 1998 issue of Next Generation magazine. Early previews showed it wouldn't differ too much from what EA had already been releasing on the PlayStation, just that it would be for Nintendo's 64-bit console. However, ultimately, EA decided to cancel the project in favor of a rebranding. Volkswagen had released a new revision of their Beetle with the tasteful name New Beetle, perhaps an inspiration for Nintendo a bit down the line, and it turns out the adorable little bug had captured the hearts of millions. As stated earlier, EA is never one to turn down a trend, so instead of sticking to supercars for their N64 racing title, EA negotiated a deal with Volkswagen to make Need for Speed 64 a racing game that would only feature the new Beetle. Beetle Adventure Racing would see release on February 28th of 1999 in North America, September 24th in Europe, and November 26th in Japan, all in the same year. The game was widely praised by critics on release, with Metacritic giving it an aggregate score of 90. Critics pointed out its varied and well-crafted level design, as well as its detailed and high-quality graphical presentation. Ironically, many critics pointed to its single-car theme as one of its flaws, with IGN reviewer Pierre Schneider going so far to contemplate what the game would have been like had EA gone for a multi-car license, such as Need for Speed. Since its release, Beetle Adventure Racing has gained more of a niche cult following, with most of its modern popularity being gained from retrospectives from modern reviewers. There was a sequel planned, but was never released, and thus presumably cancelled. Beetle Adventure Racing did find its following by being a high-quality racing game on a system that was dominated by the genre. It is a reminder of what can be done when a quality experience can be tied together with a popular trend and also some cute cars. And that is your brief history of Beetle Adventure Racing.
All right, thank you, Shane, for that. I'm sure you enjoyed reading that as much as I enjoyed making you read that. I don't know why I said that. That sounds incredibly awkward.
That's some inside baseball there, but yeah, that's fine. Yes, thank you, Chris, for writing that definitely 100% grammatically accurate brief history. I appreciate it very much.
I know, right? One of the things about this brief history that a lot of you might be wondering is because Need for Speed, I think, is a much bigger name now.
Sure.
It is a bigger name now than it was in 1999. I think they're up to Need for Speed 3 on the PlayStation at the time. It's not to say Need for Speed was a no-name racing game, but I think Ridge Racer was a little bit bigger at this time. Gran Turismo had certainly dominated everything on the PlayStation, but your arcade racing scene, that was on the N64, as we were talking about. But Need for Speed was not as big as the Volkswagen Beetle.
Few things were, Chris.
No. And I know exactly the target demographic they were going after.
Moms.
Because, moms and, middle to upper middle class suburban people. And I know this because my father owned a Volkswagen New Beetle. So I can say, yeah, they targeted the right demographic. I'm almost shocked I didn't know about or even had this game.
I don't think I have ever ridden in a Volkswagen Beetle, new or old, to tell you the truth. But I've certainly played plenty of Beetle Adventure Racing.
I mean, it's basically the same experience, right?
Basically.
Essentially. Speaking of personal experiences, I think I have, just looking at the notes, I have the least interesting story, which I already alluded to, which is I didn't play this game at all. So thank you, Randall, for voting for this game.
Huzzah.
I will say that I was looking forward to playing this game, though, just because you do get a lot of YouTubers that have come out post-release, especially within the past 5-10 years, who have said that Beetle Adventure Racing is one of those hidden gems. Maybe that's not the best use of words. That's one of those games that just went under the radar for a lot of N64 owners, which I don't think is true because it's relatively affordable. So it seems to have sold well. It's just not one of those games I heard of. But in retrospect, you do get, you have heard a lot of good things about this in recent times. So it's one of those games. How about you, Shane?
Well, I think the thing is that it's not so much that folks didn't necessarily play it or that there's not some awareness of it. I think it was that a lot of people assumed that it was just going to be a trash fire, given that it was an obvious product tie-in, as most of those tend to be. But yeah, I actually ended up renting this a handful of times from a particular place. And the reason I say this is because I know in past episodes, I've just defaulted to saying like, yeah, I rented some shit from Blockbuster, which is true. But I feel like I just need to give credit where credit is due, that there was a video rental place in my hometown in Maine as I was growing up. They were called Home Vision Video. And that was actually the place that I went to more often than not. So wherever you are, previous owners of Home Vision Video, just know that I'm giving you your proper due here and now on the Beetle Adventure Racing episode of all places.
Nice.
I certainly didn't rent it as many times as, let's say, Cruisin' World. That's for sure. Because I still think that that's a superior arcade racer. But I did bring this one home a number of times. And I got to say, I recall enjoying it quite a bit.
So, I think you are going to have the most interesting story here from personal experience you somewhat alluded to just minutes ago. So what was your personal experience with Beetle Adventure Racing growing up?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually kind of got a funny story about picking it up. Before that, I say that I thought it was kind of funny that, you're talking about, your home video store. I had Video Show Place. I was growing up in Delaware at the time.
Nice.
Which was, I had a Blockbuster. It was a little further away, but I only ever rented stuff from there like, 2 or 3 times. It was all about the local place for me. And that was where I rented stuff like, Top Gear Rally and, several other racing games on the N64. I would say that was like kind of the generation, honestly, where I was most into racing games that weren't called Mario Kart.
Fair.
Nowadays, like Mario Kart, that's about really all I'm interested in terms of modern racers. I would be into F-Zero if it, existed in modern form.
Aww.
R.I.P.
Now I'm sad.
Yeah, so honestly, though, like I'm not a car guy. Like I've never really generally gone for real car games, although I like arcade racers. I love cruising. I love those games. But this was kind of a strange game in retrospect to have caught my eye to want to buy it day one. And I kind of had this, this thing going on. I've never heard anyone else talk about this, so I don't know if this was like completely unique to my KB Toys or what, but if you pre-ordered a game at KB Toys, you got a $10 gift certificate when you picked it up.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
And I always put that $10 gift certificate back into the next game. And so I was getting, N64 games were $49.99 Delaware. There's no sales tax. So, I mean, it was what it was, so I was regularly getting new N64 games for $39.99 for years. But usually that was like first party Nintendo or second party Nintendo, or, a Squaresoft game on the PlayStation, heavy hitters. And I was honestly surprised when I asked them, can I pre-order Beetle Adventure Racing? And they said, yeah. So, I mean, this endless $10 off of all of my new games still applied to this, third party game that I didn't even think they'd take pre-orders for. So I picked it up. I mean, the reason it caught my attention is something like, yeah, I really want that, was because I was a huge fan of Pilot Wing 64. And the previews for this game looked really good. It was really impressive looking for the time. It looked like it just had a lot of fun course design. It just looked like a world that you wanted to play in, So I was like, okay, Paradigm or Paradigm, as I thought it was called at the time. Paradigm Entertainment's making this game, So, I mean, they obviously knew what they were doing with the N64, and the game did not disappoint.
I like to think that the clerk at the KB Toys, when you like rolled up in there and you're just like, yeah, can I put my $10 down on a pre-order for Beetle Adventure Racing? Like in his head, he was just like, I don't, has anybody done that? Can he do that? And he's just like, yeah, you can do that. Then as soon as you left, he's like asking his manager, he's like, are we allowed to do that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could pre-order wherever the heck you want at Funko-Land.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
That's a callback.
But at KB, I was legitimately surprised that like they had no problem with that. And it's like, okay, well, the endless $10 off certificate lives on.
Nice. Got to game that system, man. All right. So Chris, what's your boring story?
I already said it. My dad bought a Beetle.
Was it 3 Beetles?
No, just one.
Okay.
It was red.
Okay.
He had a flower in it. I don't know why, but he did. But with that, in terms of stories, the plot writing, I don't know why we're covering it, people. We're covering the plot of Beetle Adventure Racing.
Listen, we have a structure to the show. We follow the structure.
We stick with it.
That's right. Having said that, I don't know why the fuck we're talking about the writing in Beetle Adventure Racing.
Well, I mean, maybe not the writing, but I mean, I always thought the announcer had a very fun sort of voice.
See, thank you. That's what I said too.
I honestly, like whenever I've booted the game up in recent years, I always think like, is that is that Charles Martinet? Because he sort of sounds like he was the narrator for this game Runner 2 that was like the sequel to Bit Trip Runner.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. I did not know that.
And he like narrates the game, and the announcer like sort of strikes a similar sort of enthusiastic announcery tone. And I'm like, is that? And I look it up and it's like, no, it's not. And then the next time I boot up the game, I'm like, is that really not Charles Martinet? And then I look at, no, it's not Charles Martinet. I mean, that might be a weird thing to think. I don't know why it just pops in my head. Like it sounds like a tone I've heard him use the relatively few times you hear him not be Mario.
Right.
And I still think Charles Martinet is probably, yet, even though he's extremely famous, one of the most underrated voice actors in the video game industry. It's a shame he's not actually playing Mario in the Mario movie. It is a crying shame.
I still can't believe that happened, but
it's so easy. It's right there for you.
I know, right?
So that fulfills the plot writing section of this. Speaking about getting played like Mario's voice, we'll start out with you, Shane, on this one. What did you think about the gameplay for Beetle Adventure Racing?
Yeah, man. It's more fun than it probably has any right to be. That's really what it is, particularly for something that, as I said earlier, is by all accounts like a cynical licensed cash grab kind of title, right? All told, I think the standout here in terms of gameplay is 100% the track design. The levels are just fantastic. One of the things that I noticed going into it, again, having not played it since, the before times, the levels are a lot longer than I remember.
Yeah.
Like one lap is like, I don't even like several minutes. And I was like, holy shit, this feels really long.
Yeah, like 3 minutes.
Yeah. And at first I was like, this feels like this could drag. But then as I sort of got back into the groove of the Beetle Adventure Racing, I was like, oh, right. Yeah, this actually is very purposefully done because each one of the levels, and I think all told, there's something like half a dozen. I think
there's six levels.
Yeah. Each one of them is just so like well crafted and full of details with so many different like alternate routes you can take that it's likely that you won't see everything in a level in one like run through, perhaps even in a couple of run throughs.
Yeah.
And that's fantastic, especially when you think of like a lot of other arcade racers that were this was basically going up against. Was the creativity there? For sure. Yeah. But I think the sheer amount of stuff that is packed into each one of these levels is like almost unparalleled. And so it's just a lot of fun exploring. Like I found myself spending the first 2 out of 3 laps of every race purposefully trying to go off the beaten path as much as possible to like find all the different alternate routes, find the breakable boxes for bonus points, and just seeing what was there. Cause I mean, each one of the like little alternate like routes through the levels tend to also have very distinct and unique environmental things that are going on as well that you could just totally miss. Like for instance, in the Infernal Isle level, which I'm going to come back to again later because I think that level's fantastic. The first 2 run throughs, the first 2 laps, I didn't even realize that there was like a Jurassic Park section because I just didn't go that way. And then on the 3rd like lap, I just took the actual main path and it takes you through this area that's obviously like an homage to the first Jurassic Park movie with a T-Rex and everything. And I was just like, holy shit, this is great. So yeah, I just think that level of creativity and detail that they really put into that is just stellar. There's so much care that was put into a fucking VW Beetle game. It blows my mind.
Well, I mean, you say that, but I would love to know. I mean, and maybe you know something I don't, but I gotta wonder, like, I'd love to hear from the actual original development team. Like, I kind of suspect that this was a game concept that they were working on and building, and it could have been any car. And it's just like EA has the money. They say make it a Beetle game. In Australia, they didn't have the Beetle license. It's some other car. I can't remember what it is in Australia.
HSV.
Yeah. So I don't really I don't know. Like, it's so well crafted that I kind of feel like it was a project of passion by the developers, and it's just kind of the license that makes it look like it isn't. You know, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're really on the right track with that too. No pun intended.
But, you know, speaking of, you know, the different paths and things, you know, something that really struck me when I was, you know, kind of revisiting the game earlier today, I noticed that like the nitro boost boxes, like they don't respawn over the course of the track, which actually encourages you to take a different path each lap if you can, because you've spent the nitro boxes on this side path. Well, you better find another side path or just stay on the main path because there might be other nitro boxes, you know, so, and there, a lot of times you'll see like this random box, like up in the air. And, you know, it's just points or something, but it makes you wonder, like, okay, like you have to be able to get up there somehow. So there's like some side path I didn't see the entrance to. I don't play a lot of racing games today, so I don't really know if anything comparable has really come along over the years, but I just feel like there's a level of care put into these, you know, it's a small number. It's only 6 tracks, but I feel like there was just so much focus on making all of them just like really good in a way that you wouldn't if you're making, you know, a modern Forza or Gran Turismo or whatever. And, you know, there's a push to just have so much content in the game. I don't know. But that said, with all my praise of the track design, you know, I love Inferno Isle. I love the Sunset Sands. I love all of the first 4 levels. I've never really loved the last 2 levels that much, though. The last 2 levels are Metro Madness and Wicked Woods. And I do like the idea of like sort of a, you know, horror themed or spooky themed racing track level. But I feel like a big part of it back in the day was just like, it was just so dark. It's really hard to see on my TV back then. Yeah. So I never liked Wicked Woods very much. And even today when I was playing on my, you know, HDMI modded N64, it's like, I don't know, that level, I want to like that level. I love like horror themes, but that level is just not resonating with me for some reason. And the Metro level is like, I think it's a good level in terms of it does have like a lot of like paths you can go through and like garages you can just like crash through the glass and stuff like that. But just like the setting just feels so
passe.
Yeah, it's so commonplace. It doesn't fit the more exciting, adventuresome aspect of the rest of the levels, I guess.
Yep. No, I 100% agree. I thought that was actually kind of an odd choice given the selection of all the other levels being so completely outlandish that you just have like, here's a city.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the first level is like Coventry Cove and you're like going around the English countryside or something like that. But, you know, there's like castles and things like that. And, you know, you do fun things like driving through a barn. I mean, you do wacky things, but it's not quite of the level of like, have you played Cruise and Blast on the Switch? Yeah. Like it is so absurdly over the top that you're almost numb to it. You know, it's like, oh, you know, you're just a Triceratops flipping through the air and, you know, doing donuts through a runaway carnival wheel, you know, like it's so over the top that it's like I said, you're almost numb to it. Whereas like the stuff that, aside from like the little Jurassic Park bit, like Beetle Adventure Racing is a little more grounded, but it's just like fanciful enough. It like hits this really nice sweet spot of when you do, you know, have these, you know, spectacular jumps and, you know, just the general spectacle of it. Like it feels cool and special, I guess.
Yeah. And that actually functions as a great sort of dovetail into talking a little bit about how some of the levels actually change over time, which I think is another thing that sort of ratchets up that impact of the craziness in that, like, so if we're talking about Infernal Isle again, just because it's a good example, you know, it starts out as like, oh, this is neat. We're racing through this like little jungle island. That's cool. And, you know, the Jurassic Park shit notwithstanding, once you get to the 3rd lap, the route by the end of that lap basically completely changes behind the scenes without you even knowing it. and you get redirected down a different path that you have yet to actually go down at all in the first 2 laps. And not only that, but the island has devolved into just like everything is on fire. The volcano has exploded. The little village is burning down. And like, so that's just a really fantastic touch. And that's not the only level where that happens either. Of course, the impact of that, you know, the first time is always the best because you're like, holy shit. And maybe a little less so after that. But the creativity that went into that, I have to applaud them, you know. So what about you, Chris?
I've heard you guys like really praise the game. I think to a point, yeah, there's absolutely something there. But more to your initial point, Shane, the initial time you play the game on novice and you just start out, the 3 cars you get are super slow.
Right.
Plus the long track length. That initially didn't hook me. The other thing is I heard there's a lot of off tracks that you could take. And oh, yeah, there are a ton, which definitely makes this game unique. The unfortunate part is when you find these things, I want to think of them as shortcuts, but it didn't seemingly provide me any benefit if I took them. So it was a little off-putting. So it'd be like, they're not really shortcuts most of the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you really got to think of the adventure in the title, though, right?
Sure.
It's sort of tapping into that, you know, exploration and discovery that really the N64 as a whole was largely kind of about with its platformers and stuff. Like, I kind of thought of as an extension of that. I guess San Francisco Rush also kind of, you know, did some similar stuff, like, you know, finding the keys and things like that in these sort of wild places. But, you know, like I was saying earlier, like, I think the fact that there's like nitro boosts on the different paths sort of encourages you to take a different path each time.
Oh,
so
certainly.
like they could like, yeah, I see what you're saying though with the shortcuts. And I actually feel that way a lot with a more modern racing game like Mario Kart 8 or something. Like, it's like, oh, well, there's like another path here, but it's like roughly equivalent.
Yeah.
To the other paths. It's like, is there really an advantage? I do prefer the idea of like a shortcut that really feels like, you know, kind of a risk reward of like, well, it's going to be a little trickier to drive through, but if you do it right, you're going to gain some time. And I think Beetle Adventure Racing has a mixture there where sometimes they are shorter and sometimes they're just for discovery, you know?
Yeah, it's parsing together those two, because one of the things you can do is you can go to these individual tracks and get practice, which is really nice. You don't have to worry about other vehicles. You can do it all by yourself. And that's good practice to kind of develop your own route through these tracks on championship mode, which is like the main meat, unless you go to multiplayer, of course. But the one of the reasons I don't like it so much is because I wish the other cars would go on these alternate paths with you. It might be an AI limitation. I'm not sure. But it's kind of like if the intent and purpose is to do this adventure and to go off a beaten path, you would kind of expect all the other cars you're racing to do something similar. Like maybe this is a bad path, but it has a bunch of boxes because it has that Crash Bandicoot element to it. Where if you, no, it does. Like if you get all the boxes, you unlock stuff. You get additional content, or you get continues. In the Crash Bandicoot episode, as you may have heard me say, I don't like the boxes, but it's here for you if this is something that you want to do. If you want to complete this game, you want to get the most out of it. So just seeing other vehicles, if they had like veered off in some weird path, that could have been an indicator to someone who just wasn't as explorative and just stayed on the same road to be like, oh, maybe there's a path I can go down.
Yeah, but at the same time, I kind of feel like that's an intentional, like you say it's a limitation of the AI, and it very well could be. Maybe it would have been harder to like make them make those decisions. But I do think that they were kind of thinking in terms of like, oh, well, let's not spoil like the location of this stuff for the player.
Sure.
You know, because I think discovering all the different paths is very much like what the main thing the game is about.
No, absolutely. But that's kind of also where I'm going, because some of these paths are blatantly obvious. Yeah. They're not hidden whatsoever. So if it was an AI limitation, it's an AI limitation. But I think if from time to time they had a car veer off into a different direction and take a different path, I think that would have enhanced it a little bit, because like we said, these aren't necessarily shortcuts. They're just different paths. And so if everyone's on this adventure thing, not like, let's not do like Sonic R or anything like that, where just you have cars going everywhere for whatever reasons. But I don't want to beat this point to death. It just would have been a little bit more interesting, but who knows the reason why they didn't. And the fact that to be more secret, that would have been great. That's a good reason. But I think that should have been more reserved. That would have been more reserved for like the actual shortcuts, things that would definitely take some time off your voyage.
I actually agree with you on this point, in that I found myself once I realized this could happen, and granted, this is probably on the easier difficulties because I did not go try hard mode and finish this on super difficult or whatever, but it would seem that the AI is such that it sort of rubber bands in a strange way that like you're never actually that far away from regaining first place, which is kind of nice.
No, you're not.
And that also kind of, I think, pushes the player more towards, again, that more of exploratory aspect of it. But once I sort of figured that out, every single race, I spent the first 2 laps just doing nothing but like exploring and actually not even giving a shit about my placement in the race, like at all. And then I would spend the final lap just mainlining, because to your point, the actual main like route is often the most expeditious one in a lot of cases. And a lot of times the easier one to navigate. So that kind of became my strategy, is I would do all my exploring in the first 2 laps. I'd probably be somewhere between 5th and 8th place. And then as soon as I hit lap 3, then I was like, all right, explore mode's over. I need to get back to first place. And I was able to regain it pretty consistently and then, finish the race in first so I could, continue on. And that seemed to work pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised when I was playing earlier today. I've got everything in the game unlocked, but I was just playing on easy, and I was using the fastest cars in the game, which are the alien bug and the police car. And it's like, especially on easy at least, it's like almost impossible to lose with those cars because they are so much better than like everything else in the game. And I actually went back to like sort of a tier or 2 of car lower after that, because I was almost feeling like I was going so fast through these levels that I was like not really doing the exploration part. And it had been so long since I had really played any of these levels. I was like, I kind of want to back off and, do things at a little more leisurely pace.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. There's the good and the bad there too, right? Because like you get to the 3rd lap, you still want, the objective is to still win these races so you can continue on with your races. Now, I will say this too, with the faster vehicles, this game is way more fun than with the slower ones. It's not even close. Like I can still have a good time with Mario Kart on 50cc, but like the difference between if I'm going to compare this for Mario Kart, right? Just, baseline level here that everyone can kind of relate to, like the difference between 50cc and 100cc, the difference in Beetle Adventure Racing from novice to advanced was way exponentially larger. Like when I went to advanced, I'm like, oh, wow, like the controls are really good. I'm actually having a really good racing driving experience. I have to pay attention to the way I understeer, oversteer. It probably lends itself to the Need for Speed lineage that it has, heritage, whatever word you want to use.
Right.
And it works really well that way. And I was having a blast once the car started getting faster. Professional, the rubber banding isn't as much there as you get in the previous 2. You have to work for it a little bit more. The driving is more precise. You have to be better at it. Obviously, it's the professional mode. You should expect that. Also, it's a lot more fun, too, because when you hit ramps, your car goes flying. So you do get more of that adventure mindset where your car's just doing ridiculous tricks. And now you're doing like barrel rolls in the air and or aileron rolls or whatever. You're horizontally turning, whatever you want to call that. And then you land and you're continuing to drive. I'm like, I didn't know I could do that. But you can only really do that when you get your car on a ramp and just go like launching into the air, which you can't do on the lower difficulties. So that's fantastic. That's when the game like really clicks.
I think that's interesting because the game really does, like, especially with those faster cars, like the sense of speed is actually pretty surprising. Like, sure, say what you will about N64 frame rates, but, when I'm playing an N64 game, my mind is in the mindset of, the frame rate is what it is and I, move on. But yeah, those faster cars are, it is very fast. But like I said, like just for kind of revisiting the levels and trying to learn again, like where those shortcuts were, I kind of actually liked not quite the fastest car because I almost felt like it was so difficult to like see like where I could turn off when I was just flying by so fast.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm glad you brought up the point about the handling on the cars, because actually I kind of had the opposite view of this in that I actually kind of wish they were a little bit more arcadey.
Really? See, I feel like they're super arcadey.
See,
I do too.
okay, here's my thing though, is like I kind of feel like, because Chris, you were touching on this thing about how, it's like, oh, well, there's still this strategy of like, properly breaking around the corners and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
I actually that didn't feel good to me at all.
You're more a Hydro Thunder kind of guy.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Because like, honestly, I feel like it was trying to straddle this weird line between like racing sim light and like full on arcade racer. And I kind of just wish that it would have went full arcade racer, where I would have to think less about that sort of stuff. And I'm not saying that it was like super complicated and it's like I'm trying to shift gears, although you can play in manual if you're a crazy person, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that was the one downside for me, is like I never quite got the hang of like nailing those corners without just, rubbing my headlight up against the wall.
Oh, I did that all the time too.
I can kind of understand where you're coming from with that, honestly, because I tend to be very much, just hold the gas button and go, and in the kinds of racing games that I typically play.
Right.
I've never really fully appreciated the whole idea of like, analog triggers for, more sim type racing games, or even not so sim type racing games, stuff like Forza Horizon, whatever, which people say is not sim. But like when I tried that, I was like, wow, I am bad at this. Because like I just have a hard time just like not holding the trigger all the way. Like that gradation of gas in racing games is just something I've never really mastered.
Right.
But when it's just this binary, hold A to go, press B to brake, like that's not too much for me. Like just tap and brake a little bit to go around the corner. That's not so bad for me. I mean, I would, again, Paradigm Entertainment, I would put this right up there with Pilot Wings in terms of a N64 game that like I could just pop in on a whim and just like do a race, or fly through a level in Pilot Wings and have a good time, because like those controls to me are so natural. But that could also just be, a large part is just I played them so much as a teenager.
Yeah, and I think part of my personal issue is that I'm so used to Mario Kart at this point that I really just want to be able to drift around every single corner and just keep going.
You can.
Now this game does not really have a drift mechanic, so
right.
That in a lot of ways, I guess, keeps it simpler in the control aspect. So you take away drifting, you kind of add a bit of a need to brake.
Maybe that's really what my problem is. That it's not even about complexity. I just want to go fast all the time.
You can drift. It just doesn't help.
Well, yeah. There's the problem.
There it is.
Yeah.
But you can definitely drift. There is, if you press brake at the right time and turn, your car will drift like properly. It's just your car will also significantly slow down and will not help you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if that's what you're talking about, sure. Like I tried doing that with like the e-brake turns and, yes, you're right. It does drift and you'll just spin in the complete opposite direction.
I also love how like the opponents that you're racing against, if they even touch your vehicle, they fly off the track. And that doesn't matter for any difficulty. They just bump you. They go flying, and like they get aggressive sometimes too. They try to push you off the track. But if they just come up behind you and you just get in front of them, they touch your back bumper. Oh, they're gone. They go 5 seconds behind. That might be part of the rubber banding, but it's hilarious.
You know what? One interesting thing too is if you tap the L button, you respawn. So like if you're like flying off a cliff or about to fall into the lava, like you can tap the L button. It really feels like that you aren't punished very strongly for it.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Like you have a rolling start and everything. Like it's not.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you like went off like a shortcut or something and then like things go really sideways, like tap the L button, you're immediately back on the main path. It's almost a little too generous, actually, honestly, the respawn.
I need to go back and play it like that then. I'll take generosity all day when it comes to these racing games. No shame. So I think we've talked about the gameplay quite a bit here. Now let's get into something that I think might be divisive, or might not be, because I mean this is a game of that era that usually gets talked down to quite a bit. So we're going to talk about how this game looks graphically. So we're going to start out with you. Now, you already said earlier you're playing this with a HD modded N64. So you might have a different perspective on how this looks, because I don't think myself or Shane has exactly the same setup you do.
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, I played it RF run through my VCR back in the day.
Right. Oh, yeah.
I think it has a really nice texture for the system. I mean, I think it's one of the better looking games on the system, personally. I mean, and it previewed well. I mean, like I said, I pre-ordered this. Like, I mean, it looked good in screenshots and stuff. And I think it held up. I don't really have a solid idea of where the frame rate kind of hovers around. It definitely has its problems, but I think it looks very nice. There's sort of a, at the time I was very not too into a lot of Western games. Like there were a lot of European games I liked, like from Rare and things like that. But there was I always thought American games in particular, kind of very often had a certain amount of polish that I was used to from Japanese games. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this game did not really feel like the typical American game of the era. Like just the way the geometry is kind of constructed and sits in the world, it feels very solid. It's a weird thing to describe, but I felt like a lot of other games from other American developers, there was almost this sense that the world was made of these eggshells, which it essentially is, right? I mean, it's just these flat polygon faces, but something about the way that everything is textured and sort of the vertices and the way it all fits together just creates this very sort of natural, solid, real place feel to me. I mean, I'm not saying it looks real by modern game standards or anything, but I don't know. Visually it feels solid to me.
I would generally agree with you, Try, especially if I put myself back in the mindset of 1999, because I initially, when I turned on this game and I'm playing on a CRT, the initial thought was, wow, these models are pretty bad. But, I have to remember this is 1999. I have to have a different thought process here. And the more I began to play it, the more I got used to it again, the more that my eyes kind of adjusted to what was on the screen. And I started to notice some things. One is that the models for the vehicle you were controlling, the bug you were controlling, that's phenomenal, especially for the N64. That's a really good looking model. The models of your opponents, not so much. They're not that good. The other thing I was thinking about is Gran Turismo. Is because that game came out, that was on the PlayStation. Was it as good? I don't remember it being as good, but then I really started thinking about it, and there's so much more going on in the environments in this game. So it may not be as crisp, it may not be as sharp, but there's more stuff, for better and for worse, because the N64 still has that smear to it. Now, I don't have it in RGB or HDMI. I have it on S-Video, so there might be that to it. And it's a little bit more difficult to really judge it when I'm comparing it to other systems that were contemporary at the time on the same CRT TV through an RGB connection, like the Saturn and the PlayStation. So that might not be necessarily fair. But what I can say is that when you compare it to a Mario Kart, yes, a Mario Kart's going to look better, but the Mario Kart also had a different way of presenting its graphics. And I do understand what you say by it doesn't feel like a Western game either. And I think that's because, when you look at Western games of that era, they really had to stick up their ass in terms of game design. They didn't really know how to have fun unless it was just super weird, Road Rash character portraits, or super dark like Twisted Metal. This was just, it was having fun. It was enjoying itself like you would get out of a Japanese game. And it also had that presentation, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex trying to eat your car. You didn't get that in a Western game. You got that in Japanese style games. So I completely understand what you're saying. But in terms of overall graphics, it is hard to go back to for me. But when I really sit down and think about how it compares to other N64 games of the era, I do think it does stand above what you would normally expect to get, especially in early 99, late 98. Shane?
Yeah, so listen, the N64 is kind of like my warm and cozy spot in that, while the Super Nintendo is technically the system that I think I quote end quote grew up on more than anything, the N64 hit right around the time where like that's my, like, even though it looks like garbage, you know, now for the most part, I'm biased. I know I am. It's my warm and fuzzy place. And so it actually, you know what? That's a good analogy because a lot of this shit looks real fuzzy, right? But I mean, having said that, though, I really do think that the visual presentation here is really well done. And I think it benefits greatly from that sort of fun sort of aesthetic that they've got going on. I would almost argue that it's borderline cartoony in a way, but like not in a derogatory fashion. Like it's one of those deals that we've talked about before where games that have very distinct aesthetic styles tend to hold up better than games that try to go for 100% realism. I think that works in this game's favor as well, because, you know, to your point, you know, you've got a fucking T-Rex that comes out of nowhere. And I think a lot of the very vibrant colors that they've used definitely help. It's part of the reason why Mario 64 still looks relatively good even to this day. Whereas a lot of other N64 games, like my beloved Gauntlet, as much as I love that title, it looks like complete trash now. And that's just because it's a lot of like brown, you know, or very dark. The haunted level notwithstanding, I think that presentation choice benefited it greatly. And it's just like Chris, like you mentioned, it's just every level is so chock full of shit that like it's hard to not appreciate it. There's so much detail. And I think, Try, you mentioned it earlier where you're like, yeah, well, you know, there's only 6 levels, but they put a lot of care into it. And I think that was really, it was to the game's credit because they could just focus that time and effort on just that handful of levels and really, really flesh them out. And so I think that you can see that, you know, in the visual presentation that you've gotten here. I will note that there were a couple of things as far as frame rate issues are concerned that did pop up. Truth be told, it could be how I was playing the game, because of course I think out of all 3 of us here, I might have been the only one that was emulating it, but I don't think that that's endemic to like just the emulated version. I think it's just the game itself, particularly in like the snow level. Environmental effects tend to drag the frame rate down a little bit, and it is very noticeable, but not so much that it was like extremely detrimental to gameplay or anything. So yeah, as far as a Nintendo 64 game goes, I think this one holds up a lot better than a lot of the other ones.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Okay, I think this section is going to be relatively quick, and I'll start out with this one is music and sound. We talked about the announcer's voice, which is fine, and
he's cool.
He is cool, and that's all I really want to talk about, because I mean there is music there.
May or may not be Charles Martinet. We're not sure.
It's not.
Probably not. No. Other than that, it's just it's maybe I'm spoiled. I expect racing games to be similar to shmups, in that I expect them to have great soundtracks, or at least memorable soundtracks, because you do have games like Daytona USA where they're not rockin' soundtracks, but I can definitely remember those soundtracks. There's no forgetting that, or at least something that's going to keep me going.
Right.
This is just, I don't want to call it trash, but it's trash. I hate to say that.
You know, it's never been like a soundtrack that I've like listened to outside the game, but I guess just out of familiarity, you know, of it, you know, over, you know, almost 2.5 decades. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, like what any given piece of music from the game sounds like when I'm not playing it. But then when I do play it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is familiar. You know, I don't know. It's kind of got a very, it's very simple, just a lot of very light percussion, sort of taking kind of a laid back pace. Like I think there's supposed to be sort of like some retro 60s-ish undertones to certain parts of it, but it never goes full on funk either.
No.
Which might have been fun if it did.
True.
I thought it was very of the era though. I like late 90s kind of light techno, light house, without going full into it. It matched with, you're right, kind of like that late 60s kind of, but turning it into more of a techno flavor, which matches with the vehicle you're driving. It's perfect in that sense. But
yeah.
I do think it was a little too muted too. And I understand this is the N64. You're not going to get CD quality music out of a racing game. It's just you're on a cartridge. I will admit that. But it does allow for you to play whatever music you want to in the background without feeling guilty about missing something else.
Yeah, I mean, you can turn the music down separately from the sound effects if you want. So, I mean,
there you go.
You know, the music, it's kind of there, but I think it fits the game well enough. It gives it a sort of a chill, laid back vibe to it. But it is, I think, like, you know, most American game music of the time, you know, it's meant to kind of blend into the background. It's not meant to call attention to itself like Japanese music was, or music from, you know, say Rare. You know, I mean, Rare was always like way on top of things with their soundtracks. But yeah, I mean, it's about what you'd expect.
For some reason, I'm just getting this vibe. Like, if I had to personify the music of this game, it just feels like the Gap t-shirt and puka shell necklace of video game music. Like, that's what this feels like to me.
Yep.
I mean, am I wrong? Like, that's like late 90s, early 2000s. That's all I could think of. You want something that blends into the background? It's a fucking Gap ad. Like, that's what it is.
It's the Abercrombie and Fitch of soundtracks.
Yeah, there you go. You can smell the cologne from halfway across the mall.
Your vehicle's wearing some Jinkos.
Oh, hell yeah. No, that's Twisted Metal, man. That's totally different. That's the wallet chain of video games, okay?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for someone as like deliberately uncool as me, like, you know, hey, the racing game that features a Beetle, you know, like that's, you know, yeah, that's the one I'll buy. I'm not going to buy the one that has cool cars.
I also love that I think this might be in over 100 episodes the first time that we've ever talked about the music and said that one of the positive aspects is that you can turn it off. So there is that. So just crank that music down and put your VHS copy of Spice World on in the background.
Yes.
You will go full late 90s. It'll be glorious.
All right, so we're going to go over some miscellaneous stuff. But to start out, we're just kind of going to double back on the gameplay, because one of the most important things about this era, especially with racing games, was how the multiplayer aspect of it contributed to the overall experience. Now, I wasn't able to play this game multiplayer. Shane has informed me that he has not played this game multiplayer either because he had no friends growing up too.
True.
So, you have played this game multiplayer. How is multiplayer for Beetle Adventure Racing?
You know, the thing I remember the most, I mean, first of all, I don't think that is there 3 or 4 player in it? I think it might just be 1 or 2 player.
I think it's just 2. Yeah,
I think so. Because I mean, the game's pushing the system pretty hard. I mean, it's hard to scale it back enough to have a usable frame rate with 4 players. I think I definitely only remember specifically playing it with 2 players, but races, you know, me and my buddy that I played a lot of N64 with back then. I don't think the racing aspect was really so much of a mainstay as Mario Kart or F-Zero X was. But the battle mode, I don't know if this is like a hot take or not.
Ooh. But
I think the battle mode beats any Mario Kart battle mode.
Whoa. That is a hot take.
No, you need to go into this because I don't even know anything about it.
Well, see, and that's the problem. You know, this is a hot take. It's so far in the past, I don't know how well I can back it up. You went around like there was at least one mode I remember, and I can't remember if this was like the only mode, but there was something about these like different colored beetles that you had to collect, like literal actual like ladybug icons. I think there were like maybe 5 or 6 different colors, and there would be like a ladybug that appears somewhere on the map, and you have to drive to it, and it rotates through colors, you know, every second or every several seconds. And you have to collect, I think this is how it went. You have to collect all of the different colors. So, you know, you're kind of racing against your buddy to get to the ladybug and hoping that when you drive through it, it's going to be a color that you need. And then you can pick up weapons. I don't remember if weapons are in like the racing multiplayer mode or not. They're not in the single player mode, I don't think, right?
No, they're not.
There's definitely like missiles and, nitrous boosts and, your typical, Mario Kart-esque sorts of weapons. But yeah, the battle mode is just in, sort of a non-linear battle arena. And I remember playing a lot of Block Fort and all that in Mario Kart 64. Probably, since it was Mario Kart 64 was such an early game, probably overall played more battle mode in that. But once we got into the Beetle Adventure Racing battle mode, it's like, man, this is really good. This is really fun. You hear the announcer say a lot more fun things. He does his groovy and stuff like that, and
Nice.
the battle mode. So yeah, it's fun times. It's fun times.
I wish I could try this out. I'm gonna have to bring this over to your house, Shane,
Yeah,
and we're gonna have to have some battle mode.
let's do it.
I'm down. I know you have a factoid of sorts before we go into our final thoughts, Shane. So how about you share that with us?
Oh, sure. I mean, and actually, Try already brought it up because he's apparently a beast at this game, and he's just like, yeah, of course I got that. But I just wanted to point out that I thought it was pretty neat in terms of like the unlockables and stuff, because of course we didn't even really touch on that too much, but there are quite a few unlockables as far as like new paint jobs and like decals and stuff that you can get for your cars. And there are some new not new vehicles. They're still fucking Beetles, but new versions of the Beetle that you can unlock. And if you beat the game on like the hardest difficulty, you unlock a police Beetle, which is kind of hilarious all on its own. But the really neat thing about that is the horn on that car will cause all of the other AI drivers to pull over.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Which is just fantastic.
I was trying to remember what button even was the horn, and like I was like hitting several things while I was playing earlier today, and I couldn't even remember what it was, but I forgot about that part.
Yeah, which of course is like completely game breaking, but I assume they figure that if you've beaten it on the hardest difficulty, they're like, you know what? Here you go.
You've earned it.
Go nuts.
You've earned it.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm glad that you explained that, because I was pretty sure I had done everything there was in the game, but I couldn't remember how I unlocked these cars. And the fact that you just confirmed that, by extension, the fact that, my save of the game has the police car in it, I have indeed beaten it on the hardest difficulty.
Yes.
So thank you for confirming that. I was a little unsure if I had, but I was pretty sure I'd done it.
You're welcome. Glad I could give that to you.
All right. So that's all we have. And just briefly, if you're in Australia, and I know we do have Australian listeners, if you don't know what Beetle Adventure Racing is, it's because it was called HSV Adventure Racing, as I alluded to very briefly over there. So I don't know what an HSV is, but apparently that's what you have over there in the upside down. So there it is. That's the game it was called for the N64.
Well, it's definitely not as cool as a new Beetle, that's for sure.
Definitely not. No, it looked more like it was made for racing or something, which makes it infinitely less cool than an actual Volkswagen New Beetle. All right. So let's get to the final thoughts, because Try is our guest. He can have the final word on whether or not he thinks this holds up today. So Shane, how about you give us your thoughts on whether or not you believe Beetle Adventure Racing is a game that you should go back to in the year of our Lord 2022?
Yes. So listen, right? The new Beetle was a ridiculous car. It always was. And so it needed an equally off the wall game. And I strongly believe that this is that game. Neither of them really take themselves very seriously. And I think because of that, it just works. The controls, to me, do feel a little dated going back to it now. The analog stick can feel a little touchy sometimes, and you'll probably spin out a little more than perhaps you'd like to. And the graphics are, as we've said, they're Nintendo 64 graphics. So take those, however you will. I still think that in the pantheon of N64 games, this holds up a lot better than others. But at the end of the day, it's still a surprisingly fun way to kill a few hours. And if you really want to get into it and unlock the extra, Beetles and different paint colors and things like that, and find all the boxes and explore all the alternate routes, there's actually a decent amount of content to kind of dig into for something that honestly, by all rights, should have been just like a throwaway, tie-in game for the new VW Beetle. So yeah, I think it definitely still holds up today. I think it's worth at least a couple of hours of your time, especially if you're into these kind of arcadey sort of racers.
So for me, this is pretty difficult for me to decide, because I did have a lot of hangups with the way this game was designed, and I did have to put myself in the mentality of, well, if I was in 1999, how would I feel about this game? I have a feeling, don't hate me, either of you two, but I feel like I'm going to go against the grain on this one and say barely no, it doesn't hold up. And that's not to say it's a bad game or it's not of good quality. I just think there's so many more options out there that you can have a much better time with. And I know you can make that argument with essentially any game you go back with, but I feel like when you get into it, the price of entry on Novice is going to be hard for a lot of people to understand its concepts, especially the fact that it advertises a lot of these off paths as shortcuts, and it is a little jarring to figure out that some of them can put you behind, and the rubber banding is extremely weird, even though it does benefit you at times. Can you have fun with it? Yes. I would love to see like a modern version of this and to come out now and to revamp it, an HD version with all the bells and whistles that this game had today. But if I had to go back now to this genre of game, would I rather play this or F-Zero X? And it's like F-Zero X, and it's not even close. Of course, this game is fun, but when I say barely no, I mean that there are so many other experiences on the N64 that you should go to first before going to this one. And I hope that makes sense, because I'm not trying to slam it. I'm sorry, Randall. I'm sorry. And you two enjoy this apparently far more than I do. But I'm sticking to my guns, and I'm going to say barely no.
No, I heard you. What we're saying here is this is an official call for an HD remaster of Beetle Adventure Racing. I got it.
I'd take it.
Yeah.
I would take it.
Yeah. I mean, what you said about, there being so many more experiences on the N64 worth going to. See, in my head, I'm not really comparing this to F-Zero X or something. I'm thinking like in terms of real cars, or at least cars that look like real cars.
Sure.
Because I can't remember if like the cruising games, like, are they using real cars? I know that Cruis'n Blast uses licensed cars, but why would you be in it then when you could be a Triceratops?
True.
Of course.
But I can't remember if the original arcade or N64 cruising games, because I love those games. Those are the only things on the N64 that would really be competing for me in terms against Beetle Adventure Racing. Like, it would be between one of the cruising games and Beetle Adventure Racing. If I was to pick, like, what is my favorite real car game of all time?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, keep in mind, like, I'm not into sim style games. I like some of I really liked Ridge Racer on PSP, and I've struggled with those games as I've gone back to like the earlier ones, because I've never quite got the handle on the drifting mechanic in the older games. Like, it's really easy to do on PSP. But like going back to like some of the PS1 games, like I can't quite get the drifting. I really, really want to like those games. Like, I feel like there's something there I would enjoy, but I just haven't quite wrapped my head around the controls in those. So as it stands, like, the N64 is kind of where my favorite real car games are, if you want to call them that.
Sure.
And I would have to say, for me, it's Beetle Adventure Racing. Like, that's just like you said before, N64 is my warm and fuzzy place. And that's it for me too. Like, this is a game. It's hard for me to exactly put my head into the perspective of someone who has not really played this before or has barely played it before. I go back to this. I'm like, yeah, this is my warm and fuzzy place.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like, you mentioned earlier, you think Cruis'n World is a better racer. I have to confess, like, I have a huge, huge, huge soft spot for the cruising games. People who watch my life in gaming, especially those who've watched it since the early days, know that, because I did a stupid episode on the cruising games. But back in the day, for some reason, I only ever played Cruis'n USA, which is like a bad game that I really love.
Yeah,
sure is.
Like it's terrible, but man, I'd play it anytime. I love that game. That's the definition of just like some delicious garbage there.
Poor man's Outrun.
I would say that's like me in Castlevania 64.
I mean, I don't think that's quite garbage. That's underrated.
Oh,
doesn't deserve all the hate it gets. Doesn't
Try and I just became best friends. That's what I heard.
But you know, the thing is, like, I like Cruising World and Cruising Exotica. Like, unless I'd maybe played the arcade versions. Like, I'd never played the N64 versions of those. Like, it seems like a game I would have rented back in the day, but I didn't. I never played those until I got them. Like, I don't know, like maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And which is just surprising to me. So like they don't is like, I think they are stupid and wonderful and great. And like, I think like, especially World has like really solid mechanics. And then like Exotica has like the car flipping and it's just so stupid and wonderful. But I still think Beetle Adventure Racing, like even over like Cruising World, like I just, something about it. It's my warm and fuzzy place.
Well, there you go, Chris.
Absolutely fair. Hey, that's fine. That's fine. Like I said, I'm going to be the outlier here, and I will take the slings and arrows of bad takes.
No, but see, I don't even think it's a bad take. Like, I think you have a perfectly valid take. I think both Try and I are heavily nostalgic for this kind of thing. So, I mean, I think that definitely, tints things a bit rose colored, one might say.
Yeah.
But, I think you bring some objectivity to the discussion. So I think that's good.
Well, that's how I feel about Wave Race. So I'm with you guys.
Wait. I need to know about whose take on Wave Race, because Wave Race is perfect.
I love Wave Race.
Okay,
you can't say anything negative to me about Wave Race.
Okay.
I will just tell you to go home.
Okay, good. Because, Wave Race, I think, is a great example of a game that like I played a little bit back in the day. Like I think a friend had it, or maybe he just rented it. Like I didn't have that many opportunities to play it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got my own copy like after the N64 was, well done and over with. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like I can't even believe this is an early game. Like, how did they do this? And it's just like, the controls are just like, you could play that game anytime. Oh, it's perfect. Oh.
We need to scrap one of our episodes and bring them back for Wave Race.
I know, that's what I'm hearing. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that might bring our discussion of Beetle Adventure Racing to a close for today. So first and foremost, before we jump into our usual spiel, I would like to thank Try for stopping by today. This has been an absolute treat talking with you.
Thank you.
But before we do our thing, Try, for those of them out there that might not know, what is it that you do out there on the internet and how can they find you?
I am from the YouTube channel My Life in Gaming. That's just, youtube.com/mylifeingaming. We mostly do sort of retro tech type stuff, like hardware related to retro gaming. Sometimes we do stuff more game focused. Sometimes it's more hardware focused. Sometimes it's not even necessarily retro. It's just kind of whatever we feel like, but that kind of tends to be our area of focus. And, we sometimes we spend a long time getting videos done. Kind of our main hook is, in-depth deep dives with lots of meticulous editing. So it takes a while, but we do stream every Sunday night on YouTube, on our YouTube channel as well. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. And as far as we are concerned, if you are listening to this, then that does mean that you have found us. So hello. Hi. Welcome. We're glad that you're here. And if you'd like to engage with the show in some other ways besides just listening, you can do that. And not only can you do that, we have made it easy for you. All you need to do is head over to Linktree/Retro Hangover. That's linktr.ee/Retro Hangover. And you can find a menu of buttons that will take you wherever you want to go, as long as it's related to us. You can go to our public Discord, where we have a fantastic community. At the time of recording, this is the beginning of March, which means it's the beginning of a new month, which means it's the beginning of a new monthly high score challenge. So you can still jump in on those. That's always a fun time. I believe, actually, as we were recording this, it was decided that Arkanoid is going to be this month's game of choice. So there you go. And if you'd like to check out some other things, we do have our Patreon if you'd like to support the show in that fashion, as well as the merch store and a couple other places, all the socials. And funnily enough, we also do a thing on Sunday evenings. Chris, would you like to tell the people what that is?
Oh, yeah. Go to twitch.tv/retro hangover. I guess we're competing with My Life in Gaming.
Oh, no.
I guess we are.
We do it on Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern time. We kick off our streams from 9 to 11 p.m. on twitch.tv/retro hangover. So if you could have My Life in Gaming and us up at the same time, do that, because that's the way to do it. I don't want to trample over Try's YouTube stream.
Well, we started 8. We used to start at 9, but we moved it up to 8, because we're getting old.
Right.
I feel that.
So yeah. Watch us for an hour. Get bored of us. You can head on over to your stream.
There you go. It's like we planned it.
Yeah. But seriously, go to twitch.tv/retro hangover and at least follow us and go there. But check out, both channels. And I got to say, for My Life in Gaming, thank you so much, Try. You guys got to check out My Life in Gaming, especially if you're into retro games. I know you are because you're listening to this. For the best picture experience that you can get out of any of your consoles, or just tech in general, or just any sort of review. Their channel is absolutely fantastic. High production levels, very high quality. They go in depth on everything. It's fantastic. They got me through a deployment in Bahrain, and with the stuff they did. And I am so grateful that they have the content that they do. And I plead with you to go check out My Life in Gaming. Some of the best YouTube content you could find out there. So thank you so much, Try, for showing up.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, go check out the N64 digital episode so you can see the very type of mod that I played Beetle Adventure Racing on earlier today.
There you go.
And then you too can experience the adventure. All right. Well, I suppose with all of that being said, until next time,
play with your cute little adorable joystick.
Shane here with a quick message. The one rule Chris and I have always gone by regarding advertisements is this. It has to be something we use and can personally vouch for. If you know me, you know I love coffee. And Bones Coffee Company has been my go-to for home brewing for quite some time now. Their small batch beans come in an impressive variety of flavors like Mint Invaders from Chocolate Space, or Electric Unicorn, which I swear tastes exactly like Fruity Pebbles. And the best part? No added sugar or calories involved, just natural flavors infused right into the beans themselves. Build your own sample pack of 5 4-ounce bags to find out which flavors speak to you, or jump in head first with full 12-ounce bags. They've even got K-Cups. Step up your homebrew game with Bones Coffee by visiting bit.ly/RHPBones. That's bit.ly/RHPBONES.